Imagine Keanu Reeves, a lone enigma shrouded in quiet power, stepping into the gilded abyss of New York's Regal Grand Hotel on an afternoon so drenched in decadence it could drown empires. A moment destined to ignite a clash so electrifying it'd make the chandeliers tremble and the marble weep. The lobby pulses with the swagger of titans and the whispers of ambition, a glittering jungle where wealth roars and egos clash like thunderheads, every polished surface reflecting a hunger for supremacy. Amid this opulent chaos, a pompous financier struts in, blind to the storm brewing in the shadow of a man in humble black, Keanu, a silent force whose mere presence hints at a reckoning. What unfolds when arrogance collides with grace in this palace of pride? Buckle up for a tale that'll unravel secrets, topple kings, and leave you begging to know who will rise and who will fall in this dazzling dance of power. Keanu Reeves stood at the threshold of the Regal Grand Hotel on a late afternoon that glowed with both opulence and expectation, his very presence radiating a quiet magnetism that the polished floors, gilded walls, and carefully arranged floral masterpieces seemed to echo. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation, and if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. The hotel lobby, renowned throughout New York City for its exclusivity, bustled with a perpetual parade of elites, business magnates, celebrities, fashion icons, and their entourage of admirers. Each step taken across the marble floors resonated like a heartbeat fueled by wealth and ambition, signaling the city's never-ending quest for status and respect. On the surface, it appeared to be an ordinary scene of extravagance and social posturing, yet an undercurrent of anticipation seemed to stir as more people noticed Keanu Reeves, who was dressed in unassuming black, simple jeans, a casual jacket, a baseball cap pushed low. His presence carried an air of mystery. In truth, he had visited this illustrious place several times before, often forging relationships with the hotel's management to support various philanthropic events. Yet on this day, the first impression he made on an unobservant man would set in motion an upheaval of pride, humility, and confrontation. In another part of the same grand lobby, Ethan Caldwell arrived with the confidence of a general entering his victorious territory. He was a hedge fund titan known for unsparing tactics and unwavering arrogance. He had spent his entire adult life cultivating an image of ruthless success. The crisp Armani suits that lined his wardrobe, the glint of an expensive watch accentuating every dramatic gesture, and the well-practiced smile he offered whenever journalists snapped photographs. In a room filled with notables, he somehow always found a way to be the most important. Lately, Ethan had occupied a profitable sphere of influence so tightly woven that few dared challenge him, at least not openly. There had been rumors about Ethan's cutthroat business strategies and the precarious moral line he often walked. Yet in the realm of high finance, results tended to matter more than scruples. His hedge fund soared on speculation, intimidation, and the promise of monumental returns for those who dared trust him. He preferred to believe that everything could be bought or traded to his advantage. If there was a single guiding principle in Ethan Caldwell's world, it was that he could place a price tag on anything, and usually secure it at a discount. That sense of boundless control accompanied him into the Regal Grand Hotel, where he intended to meet with a select group of international investors before attending a philanthropic gala. He entered the lobby with his usual swagger, chest high, shoulders rigid, gaze directed downward at anyone who lacked his level of perceived importance. A string of staff members hurried behind him with silent deference, each carrying a portion of his designer luggage. It was a small retinue typical of his entrances, full of dramatics, reasserting that, for Ethan Caldwell, subservience from others was merely an expectation. In his haste to corral more assistants, Ethan turned to find someone else to handle a specific piece of baggage. Near the sliding glass doors, he spotted a tall, lean figure wearing everyday clothes, standing in a posture that did not reflect the typical hustle and bustle of an upscale hotel employee. Without bothering to examine the man closely, Ethan waved an imperious hand. His single-minded assumption was that this was the next available porter or doorman, and if not, money would swiftly correct any confusion. As he gestured impatiently, he was prepared to offer a financial incentive to ensure swift obedience. That was, after all, how Ethan was used to getting what he wanted. Little did he realize that he was summoning none other than Keanu Reeves, a man whose celebrity soared worldwide, cherished not only for his on-screen roles, but also for his genuine kindness and philanthropy. In fact, Keanu's philanthropic ventures had periodically led him to partner with the Regal Grand Hotel's management team to expand charitable programs. Anyone who paid attention to that world would have recognized him. But Ethan Caldwell was too consumed by his self-importance to observe that subtlety. He merely saw a tall figure wearing an ordinary outfit, interpreting it as a missed step in the usual luxury uniform demanded by high-end hotels. Ethan, in typical fashion, extended a wad of money, believing he was merely tipping a man of lowly station. He offered a large bill and insisted that the unrecognized figure carry his luggage upstairs. Even from a distance, it was evident that Ethan assumed his wealth alone would seal this silent transaction. He did not look at the man's face. He had long since perfected the habit of dismissing anyone he deemed beneath him as almost invisible. His singular focus rested on the convenience and gratification of asserting control. Keanu Reeves, having come to the hotel for an entirely different reason, remained poised. He recognized Ethan immediately, not because he was enthralled by financiers, but because the man had a notorious reputation in philanthropic circles as someone whose donations often came with conditions attached. In that instant, Keanu felt a flicker of amusement at being mistaken for the hotel staff. He had experienced similar confusions before in more casual settings, someone taking him for a restaurant employee or a quiet bystander. He never let such things frustrate him. They merely provided insights into others, approaches to respect and humility. Despite the internal amusement, Keanu felt a small twinge of sadness for the man who mistook him for a doorman, recognizing that an attitude so dismissive would inevitably cause trouble. He imagined that someone who wielded wealth so aggressively might never know the subtle connections that kindness could forge. He turned toward Ethan, intending a gentle correction, but was soon faced with a rude brush-off when Ethan, barely making eye contact, insisted that money was waiting for those who simply obeyed. The arrogance radiating from the hedge fund titan became even more apparent. Around them, a few watchful onlookers began whispering. Some recognized the man in casual clothes as the famed actor whose face graced countless movie posters and philanthropic announcements. A hush of disbelief slowly spread among the staff and guests who were more observant than Ethan. It was not often that someone so high-profile was approached as though he were a simple lackey. The entire moment bristled with a tension that felt almost theatrical. Eventually, Lucas Grant, manager of the Regal Grand Hotel, appeared, greeting Keanu with the kind of warmth reserved for a dear friend and prominent benefactor. Ethan was forced to realize his error when he saw Lucas lavish Keanu Reeves with respect, shaking his hand, thanking him for his ongoing contributions and participation in the upcoming charity event. The mention of Keanu Reeves cut through the noise like a sharp command. Ethan's initial confusion twisted into shock. A wave of mortification surged through him as he recognized that he had just insulted a global star. Worse still, the humiliating nature of this public misstep hit him with a palpable force. That was the moment Ethan discovered he was offering a sizable tip to one of the most esteemed figures in Hollywood, a man whose easy grace and humility were as legendary as his film credits. He hastily retracted the money, attempting to stutter out half-formed apologies and empty pleasantries. Yet Keanu Reeves showed only a calm, measured courtesy. He neither scolded nor publicly shamed Ethan. Instead, he acknowledged the mistake with quiet forgiveness, an attitude that somehow stung more than outrage might have. Keanu's lack of anger made Ethan feel smaller, as though he was suddenly overshadowed by a more substantial and authentic presence. Ethan's business partner, Sophia Hayes, observed from a nearby vantage point. In the past, she had grown wary of Ethan's sense of invincibility. She recognized that his extraordinary run of success had made him complacent, leading him to dismiss the potential repercussions of insulting powerful or admired people. She noticed how other guests stared at Ethan, whispering behind polite smiles, quietly amused by the spectacle. She had never seen him so undone by a single, apparently trivial misstep. The environment that day, suffused with golden light from the descending sun, seemed to sharpen the harsh reality of Ethan's predicament. In the hours that followed, Ethan pretended nothing had happened. He positioned himself near the bar, conversing in low tones with his acquaintances. Yet he felt consistently exposed, as though everyone who caught his eye was mocking him. He tried to find emotional refuge in his usual bravado, ordering an expensive whiskey and striking a confident pose, but an unspoken tension hung in the air. Thoughts of Keanu Reeves, quietly commanding respect, swirled in Ethan's consciousness. He reflected on how, in this particular place, where money and reputation meant everything, Keanu had garnered a form of admiration that extended far beyond star power. Staff members and wealthy patrons alike praised Keanu for his genuine interest in charity, his willingness to give time and energy, and his refusal to flaunt superiority. That rankled Ethan, who had always believed that the top rung of success was maintained through intimidation and clout. The night wore on, and the hum of conversation in the lobby evolved into a subdued hush. Despite the usual rotation of privileged clientele moving in and out, the atmosphere seemed subtly altered. Whispers about Ethan's bungled interaction with Keanu filtered among the crowd. Some expressed disbelief at Ethan's oversight, while others found it perversely entertaining. At last, the unstoppable mogul was showing signs of vulnerability. Ethan plotted ways to neutralize any threat. He might have apologized publicly, but his pride resisted. Surrendering control in that manner felt too foreign. He also thought of various manipulative tactics, quiet payoffs, cunning investment deals, or leveraging his network to shape narratives. Yet his typical strategies, which might have been effective in toppling lesser individuals, felt ineffectual against someone like Keanu Reeves, who never seemed to engage in that brand of power struggle. Indeed, no one seemed more untouchable than a man who exuded unfeigned humility and a philanthropic spirit. Late into the night, as the expensive drinks kept flowing, Ethan made an unsteady promise to himself that he would not be overshadowed by a celebrity. His ego simply wouldn't allow him to relinquish his iron grip on status. Over the years, he had manipulated markets, orchestrated corporate takeovers, and ended the careers of those who dared stand in his path. He reasoned that Keanu might be admired, but admiration could shift under the right pressure. If Ethan spun the circumstances cleverly, perhaps he could regain his advantage. The next morning greeted Ethan with streams of bright sunlight piercing his penthouse windows. He nursed a mild headache from the night before, steeling himself with a determined plan. He arrived at the Regal Grand Hotel's restaurant for a scheduled brunch with investors, scanning the room to ensure he would not be caught off guard again. He recognized that, for now, he must present a calm front. He believed his empire was too formidable to be unraveled by a single humiliating incident. Unbeknownst to him, Lucas Grant had already communicated to numerous influential hotel patrons how graciously Keanu had responded when Ethan tried to thrust money into his hand. Staff members shared the anecdote as well, praising Keanu's composure. It was not the scorn or scandal that Ethan would have dreaded. It was the intangible sense that, compared to Keanu's approach, Ethan came across as petty and callous. That whispering wave could prove more damaging than any formal exposé. Meanwhile, Keanu was fully immersed in his charitable preparations. He intended to sponsor an event highlighting technological education for children from underserved communities. It was a cause that the hotel planned to spotlight in the forthcoming gala, providing donors the chance to contribute resources for new computer labs and scholarship programs. Keanu's philanthropic initiatives were well established, but he preferred to keep them out of the public eye. He believed in sustaining genuine change rather than garnering attention. Indeed, for him, the praise and admiration were secondary to the ultimate goal of improving lives. Ethan only knew pieces of this. He had heard rumors that Keanu was single-handedly funding major expansions for the city's charitable networks. He considered, cynically, that perhaps Keanu's generosity provided the perfect cover. Nobody could see flaws in a person who gave so much away. Where was the vulnerability in someone who never stooped to petty antagonism and whose supporters spanned from average fans to influential philanthropists? Despite these daunting obstacles, Ethan's pride and boardroom cunning kept urging him to retaliate. The charitable gala to be held at the Regal Grand in a few days would bring together a broad spectrum of elites. It would be the perfect stage to shift public perception. He decided to gather information about any financial risk or miscalculation in Keanu's past philanthropic ventures. He suspected that if he discovered something questionable, like a mismanaged fund or a partner with a poor track record, he could recast Keanu as naive, incompetent, or even hypocritical. All Ethan needed was a small misstep to exploit, a discrete imperfection in the actor's philanthropic tapestry. Armed with a sense of renewed energy, Ethan spent the next couple of days mobilizing his assistants. He insisted that every trace of Keanu's financial dealings be examined. If there had been a collapsed startup, a defaulted investment, or any philanthropic project that ended in controversy, Ethan wanted the specifics. He ordered his staff to build a narrative robust enough to raise doubts among the philanthropic community. This time, he would not approach Keanu as an adversary in an obvious fight. Instead, he would cast seeds of suspicion and let them quietly sprout. As the day of the gala approached, the media outlets began highlighting Keanu Reeves's philanthropic commitments. The Regal Grand Hotel placed final touches on dazzling floral centerpieces and elaborate lighting to transform the main ballroom into a realm of sophistication. Public relations teams previewed the silent auction items, the curated performances, and the array of global ambassadors who would attend. Photographers arrived early to claim the best vantage points for capturing famous faces. It was the kind of event that Ethan both coveted and resented. A place to be seen, to network, to build alliances, but also a place where he risked fresh embarrassment if he failed to manage the narrative. On the night of the gala, an expectant hush filled the ballroom. Tall, arched ceilings gleamed under magnificent chandeliers. A sense of electric possibility flowed between the attendees, many of whom prided themselves on doing good while flaunting wealth and influence. Ethan navigated this space with the measured precision of a tactician. He greeted other financiers, rattling off stories of his accomplishments and ensuring that he projected an aura of unshakable success. Meanwhile, he subtly unleashed remarks suggesting Keanu Reeves might not be as impeccable in business matters as he appeared. They were slight insinuations, never direct accusations, meant to sow doubt without appearing malicious. Simultaneously, Keanu moved among the clusters of donors, mesmerizing them with his warmth and humility. He seemed to know how to approach each individual with genuine curiosity. The glimmer of sincerity in his eyes was, in fact, more potent than any polished investor pitch. He spoke about the importance of bridging education gaps, updating infrastructure in needy neighborhoods, and offering mentorship to underprivileged teens. Listeners, from top-tier investors to local business owners, felt that this star of iconic films truly wanted to create meaningful change. They believed him because he lived the cause, rather than merely preaching it. Ethan observed the growing admiration for Keanu. It grated against his ego. He decided to escalate the subtle campaign by planting an anecdote about a startup failure Keanu may have endorsed. If the rumor took hold, Ethan theorized, the philanthropic crowd might question whether their philanthropic hero was as discerning as they believed. A few quiet mentions in the right ears, a few seeded remarks about uncertain finances, and soon the environment could shift. The seeds did indeed begin to sprout. Conversations wove threads of doubt, raising measured speculation about whether Keanu had faced a miscalculation years ago. Yet, in a single, remarkable moment, Keanu Reeves took the stage to address the donors about his vision for the city's underprivileged children. Instead of ignoring or refuting any swirling rumors, he candidly spoke of his own missteps in ventures that had once promised to help communities. He described how learning from failure had served as one of the most transformative experiences of his life. He articulated how the losses reminded him that no one was immune to error, and that sincerity and transparency were the only paths to forging trust. With unwavering honesty, he acknowledged that he had once believed in a promising initiative that unfortunately collapsed due to uncontrollable factors. The lesson in humility had spurred him to reevaluate every partnership and maintain an unwavering commitment to accountability. This stunning display of openness only increased admiration for Keanu Reeves among the assembled crowd. Investors, philanthropists, and ordinary fans realized that he was neither hiding mistakes nor blame-shifting. Instead, he was willing to accept responsibility and remain steadfast in his mission to do better. The speech resonated deeply, shifting the conversation away from controversy and toward a renewed appreciation for integrity. Listeners who had begun to doubt him now felt even more inspired, seeing that his generosity and leadership extended beyond mere gestures. Standing at the edge of the ballroom, Ethan Caldwell felt a cold sense of defeat. No matter how he maneuvered or tried to erode trust, Keanu Reeves possessed an authenticity that acted as a shield. It was a type of respect that money could not buy and cunning could not penetrate. In the hush that followed the speech, applause roared through the ballroom in waves, overshadowing any whisper of scandal that Ethan had labored to foster. As the night progressed, it became unmistakable that Ethan's scheme had not just failed. It had inadvertently bolstered Keanu's reputation. The onlookers who had wavered in their opinion of him felt newly galvanized, praising him for honesty and resilience. In private conversations, some of Ethan's own associates expressed concerns about continuing to align with a man who worked so intently to undermine another person. They worried such duplicity might turn on them one day. Ethan retreated to a corner near a lavishly decorated ice sculpture. The swirling colors of the overhead lights glinted against the crystalline arcs of frozen water, producing a rainbow effect that seemed to mock his self-control. Despite his polished tuxedo and practiced polite smile, Ethan's posture was tense and uncertain. His usual assuredness had dissolved under the weight of Keanu's natural grace and the wave of goodwill that now surrounded him. From across the grand ballroom, he noticed Keanu speaking with none other than Sophia Hayes. She wore a simple yet elegant gown, her posture reflecting a calm sense of satisfaction. She appeared relaxed in conversation, clearly fascinated by the cause Keanu was championing. It stung Ethan to watch someone he had relied on for so many business ventures standing at ease with the man who had effectively neutralized his attempt at sabotage. When the gala finally began to wind down and the crowd thinned, the sense of possibility lingered. Many left feeling hopeful and confident that real change could be achieved. People no longer spoke of intangible deals, but of real actions that might make a difference in communities that rarely saw such resources. And with that shift in focus, from pure profit to genuine human interest, Ethan found himself an outsider. He left the hotel that night in a swirl of conflicting emotions. His livelihood and standing in the city's high society had never felt so perilous. On the one hand, he felt humiliated by his inability to disrupt Keanu's public image. On the other, he faced a pang of envy. He realized how easily people gravitated towards someone who radiated genuine sincerity, as opposed to the cold, transactional relationships that defined his own success. Still, Ethan Caldwell was not prepared to concede. His entire life had revolved around winning, no matter the cost. He might have temporarily lost the advantage, but he had not run out of resources. If he couldn't sway public opinion through subtle rumor campaigns, he would find another way. At that stage, he cared less about philanthropic outcomes or moral debates. He cared about reclaiming a sense of dominance. Behind the tinted windows of his private car, Ethan stared out at the vivid city lights. Everywhere, towering skyscrapers glimmered in testament to human ambition and cunning. In their myriad reflections, Ethan saw his own ruthless determination. He had not broken so many barriers in finance only to be thwarted by an actor who seemed to prioritize honesty above everything else. He decided that night that, if rumors and carefully planted accusations were not enough, he would escalate. He would find a direct means of exposing some deeper vulnerability, or perhaps use his remaining influence to isolate Keanu Reeves socially. He reasoned that even a beloved figure would have skeletons in the closet or would, at the very least, lack the appetite for a prolonged confrontation with a high-rolling financier. Such was the battle line drawn. On one side stood the lingering force of Ethan's pride, fueled by the fear of irrelevance. On the other stood Keanu Reeves, unaware that a deeper confrontation was looming. He would not likely engage with the same underhanded ferocity Ethan embraced, yet his mere refusal to descend into negativity paradoxically made him more powerful in the public eye. And so, the stage was set for a conflict that neither man had fully anticipated. The city's thirst for spectacle, combined with the relentless churn of social media, threatened to magnify every misstep. Late that night, as Ethan planned his next move, the hum of nighttime traffic and the glow of neon lights outside seemed to pulse with the promise of more upheaval to come. He felt the weight of potential ruin pressing upon him, but also the flicker of unstoppable ambition. He convinced himself that the next steps would be decisive. If he wanted to climb back on top, he would need to risk everything. The world did not belong to nice guys, or so he believed. He intended to prove that, even if it meant going to extremes. In the days that followed the charity gala, clouds gathered over the city in a way that mirrored the tension within Ethan Caldwell's mind. He embarked on a mission of relentless strategizing, feeling the urgency of regaining a grip on his once unassailable empire. Though he felt the sting of humiliation, he also detected a grim opportunity. He believed that Keanu Reeves, being humble, affable, and often inclined to avoid confrontation, might present a more vulnerable target than the typical finance rival who specialized in corporate warfare. Ethan's schemes, however, seemed to grow more uncertain with each consideration. His conversations happened behind closed doors, in hidden corners of his remaining sphere of influence, with a narrow circle of contacts whom he trusted just enough to let them glimpse the rawness of his desperation. Meanwhile, the city reverberated with echoes of the gala's success, showering praise upon Keanu Reeves, who had spoken so openly about the importance of owning one's mistakes. Journalists admired the authenticity of his approach, philanthropic circles marveled at his selflessness, and online discussions buzzed with admiration for a man so seemingly removed from self-promotion. The entire wave of goodwill appeared to heighten the fascination with Keanu's persona, he who championed causes quietly, rarely giving direct interviews about his generosity, and who never seemed fixated on controlling the narrative around him. Although Ethan endeavored to see this wave of acclaim as hollow praise faded to fade, he recognized that Keanu's popularity was only strengthening. Especially in philanthropic settings, donors and community leaders spoke of wanting to partner with him. They arranged new events and hinted at ambitious expansions of programs. The city's philanthropic scene, which often rolled out red carpets only for the super wealthy, was now pivoting its attention to a figure who reflected a deeper authenticity. Some organizers even credited Keanu's influence for opening doors to people who felt alienated by typical charity galas, those who wanted to help, but had grown cynical about manipulative leadership. Throughout these developments, Keanu maintained his usual rhythm. He split his time between professional obligations and low-profile charitable engagements. He visited community centers where bright-eyed teens practiced with newly donated tech equipment. He spent afternoons discussing improvements to local shelters. He donated quietly to mental health programs that rarely captured headlines. These tasks were undertaken not for show, but as a personal commitment to bettering individual lives in tangible ways. People who saw him up close reported that he rarely spoke of himself and seemed far less intrigued by fame than by the possibility of connecting with others in a meaningful manner. Yet as visible as Keanu had become, he remained largely oblivious to the strategizing that was unfolding behind the scenes in Ethan Caldwell's shrinking world. He never gave the impression of looking over his shoulder, never asked for personal security enhancements, and never responded to the subtle rumors that occasionally surfaced in certain corners of social media. If he suspected that Ethan was orchestrating anything beyond the failed rumor campaign at the gala, he showed no outward sign of it. You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like and let's keep going. He simply kept moving forward with the sense that everything else would sort itself out, or that it simply did not warrant the energy of aggression. Ethan, however, was not done. His confidence, so carefully maintained over years of financial conquests, had been shaken by Keanu's impenetrable reputation but not shattered entirely. Convinced that all men, no matter how revered, held vulnerabilities, Ethan combed through his waning resources, determined to find a weakness. He had a handful of powerful acquaintances left, individuals adept at unveiling hidden truths. Some had backgrounds in investigative journalism, while others operated quietly in realms where damaging evidence, if it existed, could be compiled with discretion. Ethan reasoned that, if Keanu Reeves had ever been involved in a questionable project or had built philanthropic endeavors on shaky foundations, there must be a paper trail. All he needed was one legitimate misstep to overshadow the halo that now surrounded Keanu. For nearly a week, Ethan waited for phone calls or private messages that might deliver what he so desperately sought. Each day stretched with the promise that some revelation was on the verge of discovery. Yet the intel that trickled back brought little more than trivial footnotes. A canceled partnership here, a startup's dissolution there, but nothing that was mired in legal or moral misconduct. Disappointed, Ethan pressed for more thorough searches. In hushed meetings, he huddled with those who specialized in rummaging through financial data. With each fruitless lead, his frustration deepened. While Ethan grew increasingly frantic, the city's philanthropic community moved in the opposite direction, planning another major event that would promote art education in underfunded schools. Keanu's name once again surfaced, this time as both a keynote speaker and a silent auction contributor. His involvement, it seemed, would lend enormous credibility to the cause. Rather than seeking publicity, Keanu allowed others to take the lead in organizing. He simply offered his time and the promise of personal items for the auction, including hand-signed memorabilia from some of his most iconic films. The event was slated to occur at a hip downtown venue, blending an art gallery's modern vibe with a philanthropic fundraising drive. Speculation about the event spread swiftly, especially after a few philanthropic heavyweights pledged to match donations if Keanu's fans contributed online. Not only did this create a unifying energy among the city's wealthy donors, but it also engaged everyday fans who felt empowered to give smaller donations, with the knowledge that a wealthy patron would double them. This synergy of philanthropy, fandom, and corporate generosity underscored a common thread. Keanu Reeves transcended the typical boundaries that segmented the wealthy from the rest of society. In the lead-up to this second major function, Ethan Caldwell grew increasingly determined to disrupt the unstoppable wave of positive public sentiment swirling around Keanu. He funneled a substantial sum into a covert project aimed at peeling back every layer of the actor's private world, convinced something must be hidden. He believed that no one could have navigated Hollywood for decades without compromising values or stepping into controversies, especially considering the swirl of paparazzi culture. Indeed, many major stars had endured public scandals involving personal finances, relationships, or undisclosed lawsuits. Why, Ethan wondered, had Keanu remained so unscathed? In a desperate, last-ditch maneuver, Ethan authorized his investigators to contact questionable sources, individuals known to trade in rumors and personal data. Although Ethan had once prided himself on operating within the edges of legality, the fear of total irrelevance pushed him beyond caution. Unbeknownst to him, associates who had always been uneasy about his tactics began to distance themselves. Some had grown genuinely disillusioned by Ethan's refusal to let go of his vendetta. Others anticipated his collapse and sought to protect their own reputations, not wanting to be tied to a man who conducted smear campaigns against someone widely cherished for upright conduct. In the midst of all this swirling tension, Keanu continued a steady routine of quiet appearances. He spent several hours at the offices of the downtown events organizers, reviewing the blueprint for the art exhibits and discussing which local artists might receive the most benefit from the fundraiser. He made a visit to a small youth art workshop where volunteers taught painting and sculpture. Those who observed him in these environments noted that he was happier talking about the children's future opportunities than about any personal successes. He also seemed unflustered by the endless speculation that the second event might overshadow the first gala in both attendance and impact. For him, overshadowing the prior event held no particular significance. The focus remained on tangible support for those in need. Then, in the week before the new fundraiser, an incident occurred that hinted at cracks in Ethan's plan. One of the investigators in Ethan's employ discreetly approached a tabloid website, leaking sensational and unverified snippets about Keanu's personal life. The claims involved far-reaching suggestions about possible behind-the-scenes feuds, rumored hush money, and distortions of philanthropic efforts. Had these allegations landed in a more unscrupulous publication, they might have ignited a scandal. Instead, they were initially met with skepticism and mild interest. The public, so used to damaging revelations about celebrities, appeared open to hearing anything that might disrupt the narrative of the so-called nicest guy in Hollywood. For a brief moment, the tabloids teased that they had major news to break. Yet this time, the tide turned quickly. Within a matter of days, multiple sources from philanthropic nonprofits, co-stars, and local organizations swiftly denounced the rumors as baseless. Testimonials emerged from volunteers and professionals who had worked closely with Keanu on a variety of initiatives. A groundswell of respect overshadowed any fleeting doubt. If anything, the attempt to smear Keanu only inspired those who respected him to speak more loudly about his sincerity. Some supporters suspected jealousy from an unknown party behind the rumored scandal, voicing outrage that such blatant fabrications had even surfaced. Ethan's attempt at leveraging tabloid sensationalism not only failed, but further sullied his own reputation in circles where he had once been a figure of power. Certain media insiders, who recognized the subtle fingerprints of third-party sabotage, privately speculated that Ethan Caldwell was behind it. They had witnessed his thirst for control and the lengths to which he was willing to go. Over time, a handful of quiet rumors circulated, back-channel talk that Ethan was waging a fruitless war on Keanu's public image. There was no hard proof, yet the suspicion, combined with Ethan's prior missteps, spread in philanthropic circles with astonishing speed. When the day of the art education fundraiser arrived, the city crackled with anticipation. Housed in a converted warehouse in downtown Manhattan, the space featured exposed brick walls, bright overhead lights, and countless modern art installations. Crews worked tirelessly to assemble a stage, arrange seating, and organize interactive art stations where underprivileged children could showcase their own creations. The entire concept revolved around uplifting talented youngsters who had no formal access to art education, while also giving well-known benefactors a chance to witness firsthand the kids' artistry. Supporters filed in from every end of the city, some wearing formal attire, others dressed in eclectic or experimental styles in line with the creative theme. Keanu Reeves arrived without fanfare or entourage. He moved calmly through the lively venue, greeting the young artists and pausing to admire sculptures or paintings made by local teenagers. He asked questions about their techniques and their aspirations, encouraging them to dream even bigger. Word spread swiftly that he was present, and soon attendees, including some major donors, gravitated toward his location in the warehouse. The organizers gave a brief speech about the event's goals and then handed the microphone to Keanu for a few short remarks. Rather than praising his own generosity, he took the opportunity to highlight the kids themselves, emphasizing that art is an indispensable gateway to self-expression, a tool to both heal and unite communities that often feel torn apart by socioeconomic barriers. The response was overwhelming. People applauded, joined donation lines, placed bids on silent auctions, and signed up to volunteer. Across social media, hashtags referencing the event began to trend, merging with the positive coverage from mainstream outlets. A powerful sense of celebration hovered in the air, fueled by the success in raising a remarkable sum of money. The atmosphere was festive yet purposeful, a mixture of wonder at the displayed art and admiration for the commitment to forging real opportunities for those who lacked them. Midway through the event, a slight tremor of tension slid across the venue. In a back corner, standing near an abstract metal sculpture, Ethan Caldwell made an unannounced appearance. Dressed in a sharply tailored suit, he looked out of place among the creative color and unpretentious crowd, projecting an aura of someone who refused to accept that his veneer of power no longer resonated. A few attendees offered polite nods as they recognized him, but many responded with subtle wariness, remembering the fiasco of the earlier gala and the swirl of suspicious rumors about his vendetta. The warehouse's ambience seemed to shift as Ethan proceeded further in, scanning the space until he caught sight of Keanu Reeves in conversation with a group of donors. For a moment, no one approached Ethan, leaving him to stand alone, uncertain of how to make his next move. He had come intending to reassert some measure of control or attempt a final show of dominance, but the entire event radiated a feeling of warmth and sincerity that contradicted everything Ethan had prepared for. People were clearly energized by the sense of collective goodwill that came from supporting young talent. The environment did not lend itself to cunning manipulations or underhanded schemes. Still, Ethan inched closer to where Keanu stood, determined to re-establish a sense of confrontation, or, at least, to glean some sense of personal vindication by confronting him. However, a peculiar quiet took hold of Ethan's mind as he observed Keanu's interactions. One of the teenage artists, showing off a series of painted canvases, was explaining the inspirations behind each piece. Keanu listened with unforced attentiveness, occasionally leaning in to view details and nodding in genuine curiosity. When the young artist expressed doubt about pursuing a creative career, fearing it lacked practical stability, Keanu responded with gentle encouragement, urging the boy to believe in his talents and find ways to balance passion with necessity. All around them, people responded to Keanu's presence not as fans in awe of a celebrity, but as individuals drawn to authenticity. At no point did he appear to push an agenda or brandish the kind of self-importance one might expect from an internationally known star. Instead, he seemed determined to bolster every donation, highlight each child's creative spark, and thank the patrons for caring about art education. Watching from a short distance, Ethan felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The same relentless ambition that had fueled his earlier campaigns whispered that he should attempt a show of public bravado, perhaps challenging Keanu's seemingly unstoppable popularity in front of everyone. Another voice inside him recognized how utterly misguided that tactic would be amid this scene of supportive energy. For the first time in a long while, Ethan wrestled with a sense of moral awareness that told him such aggression would only highlight his own emptiness. Still, he could not retreat entirely. He wandered closer until he found himself standing a few paces from Keanu, trying to summon the courage for a confrontation. Keanu turned after concluding a conversation with a small cluster of donors, noticing Ethan in the background. A series of unspoken questions seemed to flicker across Keanu's face. Yet, true to form, he showed no visible sign of hostility or fear. He simply carried the same measured calm that had defined him since the day Ethan mistook him for a doorman in the grand lobby. In that shared pause, Ethan recognized that the energy in the entire venue favored one who approached with open-heartedness rather than manipulative guile. Something about the hush that fell in that corner of the warehouse pressed Ethan into self-reflection. The battles he had once relished, the triumphant gains, the illusions of invincibility, felt strangely irrelevant here. He recognized, perhaps for the first time, that his attempts to undermine Keanu Reeves had only revealed his own insecurities to the public. Breaking the moment, someone called for Keanu's attention from another part of the venue. Rather than ignoring Ethan or trying to sidestep him, Keanu offered a slight nod of acknowledgement and excused himself, moving on to greet others. He made no move to lecture, embarrass, or parade the fact that Ethan was standing alone, clinging to the unraveling threads of a vendetta that had failed. The entire affair served as a quiet demonstration of how a person might disarm conflict with unwavering composure. Moments later, Ethan slipped away from the crowd and stood near the exit. Outside, the evening sky shimmered with the city lights, diffusing softly through the transformed warehouse windows. The hum of street traffic blended with the distant echoes of music from inside. He remained there, uncertain, reflecting on how his attempts to rule through intimidation had led him to this point of profound isolation. He thought of how the city's philanthropic community had once eagerly sought his investments, how the tabloids once printed his name with reverence, how journalists once referred to him as a self-made finance genius. Now, not a single person had even approached him to discuss deals or future plans. He felt haunted by memories of his early career, when a young, ambitious version of himself believed he was forging a legacy of unstoppable triumph. At the time, he had dismissed trust or respect as secondary concerns, focusing solely on personal gain. Observing the genuine relationships around Keanu, rooted in empathy, humility, and shared purpose, unleashed a swirl of envy and regret in Ethan's mind. The cost of his entire worldview now seemed infinitely higher than he had ever anticipated. In the weeks following the art education event, the momentum continued to favor charitable projects associated with Keanu Reeves. Press coverage marveled at how these ventures transcended the usual barriers that often separated wealthy donors from the local communities they were trying to uplift. Corporate sponsors expressed excitement at partnering with initiatives that seemed guided by sincere goals rather than superficial socializing. Online fans clamored to promote the philanthropic causes, turning each donation drive into a viral phenomenon. Touched by it all, Keanu appeared content to remain in the background, seldom stepping forward, unless he believed his words or presence might spur another wave of support. Ethan, increasingly isolated, struggled to come to terms with his situation. Advisors he had known for years refused to take his calls, or else they returned them with vague, non-committal offers to connect him with lesser-known investors who might not be aware of his tarnished reputation. Board members continued to dissolve their relationship with his old hedge fund. In some corners, the rumor grew that Ethan might leave the city altogether and start a new enterprise in a place less attuned to the scandal overshadowing him. This frightened him, as it confirmed his worst fear, that he had lost the only form of significance he had ever possessed. One clear morning, after weeks of introspection, Ethan revisited the Regal Grand Hotel, the place where his humiliation had begun. He sat alone in the lobby, noticing the swirl of sunlight on the impeccably polished floors. The environment still brimmed with quiet grandeur, as though the building itself was unconcerned with the fortunes of any one individual. He considered how much had changed since that fateful day when he treated Keanu Reeves as if he were a menial servant. He reflected on whether the downfall he now experienced could ever lead to redemption. In a sudden burst of resolve, he rose from his seat, approached the hotel's manager, Lucas Grant, and inquired about any upcoming charity events. Lucas eyed him with a mixture of reservation and curiosity, informing him that Keanu would soon sponsor another project aimed at granting scholarships for technical education. Ethan, feeling some faint spark of courage, asked if there was a way he could offer support. Lucas maintained a neutral expression, aware of Ethan's prior misdeeds, but tentatively shared that the scholarship's administrative details would be managed at an off-site location, with an open invitation for donors to come and witness how the selection process worked. Although Ethan suspected that his involvement would meet with skepticism, he decided to attend, prepared to face the awkward possibility that his mere presence would rouse disapproval. On the day of the scholarship orientation, he showed up in the minimal attire that still showcased his wealth, a simple suit lacking the flamboyant touches that once displayed his power. Entering a modest meeting space where a handful of prospective scholarship recipients and donors sat, he settled quietly in the back, hoping to remain unnoticed until he could gauge whether stepping forward to donate was even acceptable. Keanu Reeves, who was there to personally introduce some aspects of the scholarship program, spoke about how technical education could open doors to innovation, entrepreneurship, and stable careers, especially for those who lacked the means to attend expensive universities. He outlined how each scholarship would cover tuition, provide mentorship, and facilitate a broader community. While he touched on details, the warmth in his voice reflected a genuine faith in the potential of anyone willing to learn. After the formal portion ended, the recipients and sponsors mingled in small groups. Ethan lingered hesitantly by the refreshment table, uncertain whether to approach or remain sidelined. Eventually, a volunteer coordinator recognized him and, after a brief pause, offered him a seat to learn more about the scholarship distribution process. She seemed slightly wary, but no outright hostility was apparent. Ethan learned that the scholarship lacked the typical corporate branding deals or promotional strings. The approach was straightforward. Each recipient would be matched with a sponsor who pledged a fixed amount, and the entire effort would be backed by Keanu's overarching foundation, which handled administrative costs and insisted on transparency. Ethan felt a strange pang of regret, recalling the intricately self-serving deals he used to craft, where every act of philanthropy doubled as an investment or a marketing ploy. Here, the structure emphasized clarity and genuine support, exuding a sense of earnestness that Ethan found refreshing yet unfamiliar. Eventually, Keanu made his way to the back of the room, taking breaks to greet each volunteer or donor. When he arrived near Ethan, he offered a simple hello without any pointed references to past encounters. The atmosphere around them was subdued, reminiscent of a quiet acceptance that sometimes emerges when people have outgrown old feuds. As the volunteer coordinator explained how the scholarship pledges would be handled, Ethan acknowledged that he was willing to fund a few recipients. He did so in subdued terms, removing any suggestion that he wanted recognition in exchange. Over the course of that afternoon, Ethan observed the synergy of an initiative organized by individuals who believed in altruism over hidden agendas. Though many in the room recognized him as the disgraced financier who had tried to undermine Keanu, they treated him with cautious politeness. A few, including the volunteer coordinator, expressed that if his donation was sincere, they welcomed the support. No one lauded him as a hero or publicly thanked him. It was a chance for him to witness the kind of philanthropic environment where trust must be earned, not demanded. Leaving the meeting, Ethan experienced an unaccustomed sense of stillness. His pledge was modest compared to the sums he once tossed around in high-profile deals, yet it carried a weight beyond raw numbers. He recognized this was the first time in years he had contributed to a cause without orchestrating a publicity angle or expecting a strategic payoff. For once, the anonymity of giving felt oddly liberating. In subsequent weeks, Ethan fulfilled his promise by quietly transferring the funds. He followed the scholarship recipients' progress as they enrolled in technical programs. The simple satisfaction of seeing them thrive ignited a new awareness within him, one rooted in the possibility that giving, without an undercurrent of power or transaction, could build the kind of legacy he once believed only corporate conquests could achieve. In the background, Keanu remained an unspoken anchor of this transformation, embodying a living example of how humility and open-heartedness could serve as the greatest tools for change. News of Ethan's discreet donation trickled through philanthropic circles, prompting mixed responses. Some were skeptical, waiting to see if this was just a tactical repositioning for a future comeback. Others tentatively applauded him for at least trying. Over time, the intimidation factor that had once defined his persona receded, replaced by quiet speculation over whether he was genuinely changing or merely biding his time. Keanu himself made no grand proclamations about Ethan's involvement. He did not mention it in interviews or to the press. He rarely mentioned Ethan at all, as if refusing to amplify a rivalry that no longer needed to exist. Instead, he continued championing the scholarship initiative, securing additional partners, and connecting recipients with real-world mentors who specialized in coding, engineering, and emerging technologies. Eventually, an opportunity arose for the program's sponsors to meet the scholarship recipients after their first semester concluded. Gathered in a college auditorium, the sponsors listened as the students shared stories of their early experiences learning the ropes of new fields. Some had faced academic struggles, while others flourished, and a handful discovered unexpected passions that deviated from their original plans. Through it all, the students conveyed gratitude for the scholarships that made their studies possible, along with the promise to use their growing skills to uplift their local neighborhoods. Ethan, seated at the side of the auditorium, felt the weight of a realization sinking in. The sum of money he contributed was significant, but the collective result, each student's determination, each volunteer's mentorship, each sponsor's kindness, was a force greater than any single donation. For the first time, he perceived the synergy of genuine collaboration, free from backroom negotiations or Machiavellian deals. It was a force that overshadowed even the largest corporate takeovers he had once orchestrated. When the session ended, Ethan noticed Keanu at the front of the auditorium, speaking to a group of aspiring coders. Unlike the fervent environment of a lavish gala, the space now felt academic and earnest, geared toward the real nuts and bolts of shaping young minds. Watching from a distance, Ethan experienced a blend of humble gratitude and lingering regret. He knew how close he had come to destroying everything around him just to bruise the reputation of a man who never even tried to fight back in the conventional sense. He recognized that, through it all, Keanu's example had done more to dismantle Ethan's illusions than any direct confrontation could have achieved. Over the next few months, Ethan took measured steps back into the city's philanthropic arena. He did not expect an immediate embrace, nor did he plan to replicate the aggression of his past. He simply continued supporting select causes, some connected to the Reeves Foundation, others outside it, steering his contributions toward areas where they might make a lasting difference. He kept his distance from corporate boardrooms, acknowledging that his reputation there was likely irreparable, and also realizing that he no longer found that world fulfilling. The transformation was, at times, an unsteady road. He caught himself longing for the old sense of unchallenged dominance, the high of making deals that influenced market behavior. Yet he discovered that the calm sense of participation in philanthropic aims offered a more profound satisfaction that he had never experienced before. To his surprise, even though he no longer had an empire to control, he felt more at ease each day. Though they never shared a dramatic moment of official reconciliation, there came a time when Ethan and Keanu happened to cross paths once more at a modest community ceremony. It was a small celebration of a program milestone, where a group of scholarship recipients had finished an important phase of their technical training. The students expressed their gratitude, praising the donors who had opened a path of opportunity. In that environment of quiet pride and hope, Ethan observed Keanu greeting participants and exchanging a few words that radiated encouragement. Stepping away from the ceremony, Ethan pondered the extraordinary arc that had brought him here. He had once tried to sabotage a man widely viewed as unstoppable, only to find that it was, in fact, Ethan's own illusions that came crashing down. In the wake of this collapse, he had unexpectedly discovered a path where sincerity held more power than any cunning manipulation. He felt an unspoken clarity. He could let go of the old narrative of winning at all costs and instead embrace a method of building that defied his prior logic of acquisition. Keanu Reeves had not taught him these lessons by direct instruction, but by living them. As the ceremony drew to a close, Ethan lingered at the edge of the small stage, watching the scholarship recipients help each other tidy up. Several staff members packed up leftover snacks, folded chairs, and turned off projection screens. The building's lights gradually dimmed, casting the space in a softer glow. In a quiet corner, Keanu and Ethan happened to exchange glances. Neither man spoke, and no handshake passed between them. It was simply an unspoken acknowledgement that the conflict that once loomed large had dissolved into something else entirely. Ethan left the building that night with the sensation of setting down a burden he had carried for far too long. A gentle rain pattered against the sidewalks, reflecting the glimmer of streetlights. In that subtle interplay of city sounds, he realized that life would move forward without seeking his permission. The crucial difference was that now, he no longer wished to fight every current. He was content to walk a different path, one he had spent years dismissing as pointless. In the months that followed, talk of Ethan Caldwell's downfall waned. The corporate sphere only mentioned him to reference cautionary tales about hubris. But elsewhere, in local nonprofits and fledgling philanthropic projects, word spread of a discreet donor who spent time listening to volunteers and recipients of aid, trying to understand their journeys. That donor never sought the spotlight and never attached complicated conditions to his gifts. Those who recognized him as the once feared hedge fund titan seldom confronted him about his former life, either out of courtesy or because his humility signaled that he had already confronted the truth of it himself. Keanu Reeves continued on his path as well, scarcely noticing how the philanthropic universe had subtly integrated Ethan's new presence. He stayed committed to the quiet sincerity that had always guided him, devoting energy to new educational programs, relief efforts, and expansions of the scholarship. Each success story from the program, whether it involved a young engineer launching a community-driven invention or an artist gaining acceptance into an advanced academy, testified to the value of unwavering generosity. Keanu welcomed these stories with the same unassuming warmth he had brought to every conversation since his earliest philanthropic steps. Eventually, the city advanced to other narratives, other controversies, and other heroes. Yet a persistent legacy took root among those who paid attention to the transformations around them. They recognized that neither personal wealth nor media acclaim could outlast the simple resonance of genuine concern for others. People spoke of Keanu's philanthropic expansions with admiration, and they remarked, in hushed and curious tones, about the subtle evolution of one of the city's most notorious financiers, who once tried to degrade a generous actor for personal gain. The final shape of these events revealed no dramatic spectacle of public apologies or grand gestures of contrition. Instead, it manifested as a quiet shift in the dynamic of an entire community, spurred by the example of a man who had never entertained the idea that decency might be a liability. Keanu Reeves remained at the center of a ripple effect that strengthened local charities and emboldened everyday citizens to be more involved, bridging divides that once seemed unbridgeable. Standing on a modest stage at yet another philanthropic gathering, this time dedicated to mental health outreach, Keanu expressed, in measured words, how every contribution, no matter how small, could produce immeasurable change. In the back of the room, blending into the crowd, Ethan Caldwell listened intently, not with the intention of launching a scheme, but with the genuine desire to help. The words resonated with him as deeply as if they were spoken for him alone. For that single moment, Ethan recalled the man he used to be, a victor in every sense but bankrupt of empathy. In the new light of day, he felt gratitude for the strange series of events that had undone his carefully curated facade and brought him to a place of authenticity. He no longer viewed Keanu Reeves as a rival. Rather, he saw him as a living symbol of what it meant to achieve something transcendent without leaving one's better nature behind. When the final applause echoed through the venue, overshadowing the hum of city traffic outside, Ethan departed quietly, reflecting on how unexpected it was that the story he tried so hard to control had culminated in a revelation more powerful than any scheme. Keanu Reeves had taught him, by example, that true strength lay not in orchestrating cunning maneuvers, but in letting go of the illusions that separated one from the essence of compassion. And thus, the conflict that began in the lavish corridors of a five-star hotel ended in the quiet spaces of the city's countless philanthropic efforts. No resounding defeat, no triumphant downfall, but rather a simple, irrefutable transformation for a man who once thought money could purchase everything, including respect. Through all of it, Keanu Reeves maintained the same unspoken principle he had championed from the beginning, that the greatest gift one could offer was not wealth, power, or influence, but humility, understanding, and an honest desire to see others thrive. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel, that way you'll never miss our newest uploads.